Hey there, Chad here with a sidebar to my Kerbal Space Program in 2021 video series. In this particular sidebar, I'm going to talk about space tourism. But before I get started, I'm going to clean up some of the debris that is floating around the planet right now from previous missions. These things will float around there, and you can see them once in a while as you launch and as you do missions. But I prefer to clean them up. A couple of reasons. One, I just don't really have the need for that level of realism, and secondly, they do take up a little bit of processor at certain times, and I just really rather not have to deal with that. Some of these are actually on the planet in the water, and I can retrieve them, and that'll save a couple of dollars, although that is it's not enough to write home about, that's for sure. Also, I'm going to leave Hotel alone. I'm going to leave it in orbit. That is the station that I used for the rendezvous mission that I did in episode 11. I'm going to run these tourism missions frankly, to make some money so that I can upgrade the research and development facility. The research tech tree is limited by the level of the research and development facility, and I don't believe I've upgraded it at all yet, so it is still level 1, which restricts how far I can go in the tree. It costs about 450,000 credits to upgrade it, and while I have that, I like to have a little bit of breathing room. So what I'm doing here is going in and selecting some of these tourism missions because they pay pretty well. Not all of them are great, but every little bit helps, first of all. And you'll see this one has a pretty nice chunk of change with it. So I'm taking one of the VIP missions and then a couple of the four-man missions. And I'm going to do those really quickly. Probably going to skip through most of that in the actual video, just kind of demonstrate that it worked, show the ship that I use. When you select these tourism missions, you do need to pay some attention because sometimes the itinerary for individual passengers will be different. In this case, they're all the same. It's fly by the moon, orbit around the moon, suborbital space flight on Kerbin, and a lot of times it'll also be orbit Kerbin. Actually, I think they are a little bit different here. Sometimes they're dramatically different. One passenger wants to orbit Kerbin, the others don't, and you don't get the full payout until you complete the whole thing. Here's the rocket I'm using for the four-man missions. I'll give a quick rundown of it. It's got a capsule on the top, and Valentina is our pilot. There's a control wheel. On that control wheel, I put 4 thrusters to help with re-entry, and I'll talk about that a little later. Then there are 2 crew cabins. There are 4 radial parachutes on those crew cabins. There's also a parachute on the top of the capsule. Then I used one of the adapters and went with the larger engine. I basically made this a one-stage rocket as far as getting into orbit. That's a nice powerful skipper engine there, and that will get me all the way to where I need to go. So I mentioned the thrusters on basically up on the capsule on the return vehicle. This is a very long vehicle to return from space, right? It's basically 3 sections, 2 crew cabins and then the capsule on the top. And when it would re-enter, of course there's a heat shield on there, but when it would re-enter, it would want to flip around and point nose down. And that does not work well. Basically the rocket does not bleed off enough speed and it slams into the ground before the parachutes can open. So the thrusters there are basically to help it maintain stability as it is going through the re-entry burn. It helps keep it so the heat shield is pointed down, and that allowed me to complete the mission and return everybody safely. We're going to go ahead and fast forward through a lot of this here. The majority of my launches are very vertical, and what I mean by that is I tend to launch my rockets up, and then as they get to the edge of the atmosphere, I'll turn them sideways and then accelerate them. That is not terribly efficient. There's a technique called a gravity turn, where as the rocket is launching, you slowly allow it to fall over, and the thrust ultimately puts it into a big circle around the planet. I am just not very good at that. That is a technique you can practice and get some skill with, and can save you a little bit of fuel on your launches. But what you probably have seen here is I tend to launch up, I'll tilt it a little bit, and then once I'm up there, I turn it sideways and thrust until I circularize the orbit. It's not really the best way to do it. Works for me. Haven't run into any huge problems with doing that, but I would much prefer being good at the gravity turn. I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to the deorbit burn. What you might notice is there's only about 114 meters per second of delta V left in this rocket right now, less than 2 seconds of burn time. That's cutting it pretty close, but it is more than enough to get us deorbited. Now, to be safe, I did wait until I got around to the apoapsis to fire the engine here to maximize that fuel use. When you're at apo and you do retrograde or prograde, you're getting the most bang for the buck. But as you can see, we dropped from an apo of 87,000 meters and a peri of about 71 to where the periapsis is now well below the planet surface. Usually you want to get it down below probably about 22,000 meters, and below that you're safe. The lower it goes below that, the steeper your trajectory will be through the atmosphere, so it'll go faster, but it will also be a lot hotter. At this point, we will start to see the heat plume coming off from the friction, and I've asked Valentina to hold a retrograde attitude, and then I've also flipped on the reaction control system, or RCS, so that those thrusters can help maintain that attitude. This was a relatively uneventful re-entry, but it did last almost 3 minutes. I did start to get some bars on a couple of the parachutes for heat, but ultimately the heat shield took care of everything and it never really got to a critical state. This is why I like using the flight engineer, because you can watch the heat numbers. And finally, we will get some good parachutes here. You'll see all 5 of them. And then the capsule and passengers drift calmly down to the ocean, and there's a splashdown. Now, the purpose of these tourism missions was to line our pockets a little bit to be able to afford that research and development upgrade. These tourism missions definitely help pad the Kerbal bank account and allow me to continue on with some of the other pursuits in the main series of episodes. I think that'll do it for this particular sidebar. Thanks for watching, and if you want to continue on with the episodes, I believe the next one would be episode 12, which will be a rescue mission. Thanks for watching this time, and until next time, fair travels.